I'm Wendy Capewell, an experienced counsellor and psychotherapist. I work with so many people who feel that they're the only ones struggling with the issues that they share with me. Possibly, like many of you, they feel so alone. And so the aim of this podcast is to talk to guests who have their own stories to share, their experience of the struggles that they've been through, or maybe they're continuing to live with, offering their insights as well as their inspiring journey. So let me introduce my guest. I'm going to introduce today Chris Templeton. He's the founder of Oh, the Stories We Tell. And I love this because, boy, do we tell ourselves some stories. So, yes, I'm going to hand over to you, Chris. And so you can tell the audience much more about yourself and, how you became the founder of Oh, the Stories We Tell and what it means to us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy, so much for having me on. I totally appreciate being here and being able to share with your audience this little gem that I have put together. And it is a gem. I mean, if you take this to heart, it's life-changing. I started doing this work in 2003, started uncovering some questions, which turned into questions in a model. And it changed how I raised my kids. It changed how I was a partner to my wife, how I dealt with employees and vendors and clients. And so, and most importantly, I forgot this one, how I deal with myself and how I have what I like to say is, oh my gosh, clear glasses, not rose colored, not dark shades with clouds over our heads, really, really clear glasses. And they can always get clearer. There's always more to the story than, but so that's kind of, I got started in 2003 reading a book called The Power of Now. I always say the Power of Now. I get them confused. Got to get some of me in there. No, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And his whole thing is how one of the big things, other than being in the moment, is this idea of how good we are at driving ourselves crazy in certain parts of our lives. And then if we get really good at it, we tend to see the rest of our lives with that kind of cloud over our head. And so it really struck me that, oh my gosh, I'm the one that's responsible for how I color my world and how I look at myself and the people around me. And I have a tendency to either be very negative and very judgmental, or I have a tendency to be really, really positive and everything's great until it's not. And then wham, I'm over at the negative side of the model. So, so having that basic understanding of, when, I think about all the kind of new age thought of, well, Chris, Wendy, you create your own reality. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And finally, it kind of came clear to me that, yeah, there's this reality out there. And a lot of people say, oh, you're creating it, but we're all creating, if we're creating it, we're all creating the reality around us as a collective consciousness. But for every single one of us, we're responsible. We are the ones that are taking the input and deciding how we're going to color it, or if we're going to put on clear glasses. And unfortunately, in the places that we struggle, we tend to color. Usually dark clouds or rose colored glasses.
Yeah. And I think you say that we create our own reality, but there's also that part of us that is hardwired in the way we survived. And you talked before we started this conversation about the fight or flight response. But we developed unconsciously quite often as young people, as children, strategies to help us survive in the world.
Yep.
And those strategies, people talk about them as defenses. And I go, No, it's not defense, it's protecting. And you talk about the protector. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But it's how we learned how to survive. And it could have been that we always had to be the good girl. It could have been that if we get really angry, we'll keep people at bay. If we just spend lots of time looking after others, then they'll be our friend. If we hide away and just don't connect with the rest of the world, keep ourselves to ourselves, we will survive. And it is that kind of thing. And I've got several of them that I know come up for me. It has to be, well, it must be all my fault. It must have been something I'd done wrong. And I will go there on occasions, even now.
Yes.
But I learned that as a small child because I was told that. I was told it's something you did wrong. Oh, well, if you don't know what you did wrong, then I'm not telling you. You might do something wrong, so I'm going to tell you off before you've done it. And it's all of that really, well, it must be my fault then. So everything, not now, but on occasions I'll go to that place. What did I do wrong? But it's because it kept me, I had to be hypersensitive, hypervigilant. I've got to keep abreast of what's going on. I've got to keep my antennae going just in case. And no, it wasn't good to feel like that as a child, but it did make my life a little easier. So, yeah, over to you.
That's exactly right, Wendy, and this is really a big piece of what I've come up with is this idea of we tell stories. And, I used to think when I was younger, this whole thing about, oh, your inner child and growing up impacts you and, oh, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh my God, at 60, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, that stuff does impact you and it does stick with you. And the thing that's really important to keep in mind is, you know, like you said, there are things, stories that we tell, strategies that we developed through growing up with my parents and my brothers and my sisters in school and being bullied or whatever, last one picked. All of that stuff sticks with you, and you have stories about how to deal with that. The problem is we take those stories into today and they don't serve us. They absolutely served us at the time that they were developed. Strategy for dealing with being bullied, or mom and dad are not nice to me the way that I think they should be, and I'm going to come up with a story. So understanding that so much of the places that we struggle are based on strategies that we developed back when we were younger, and then being able to say, wait a minute, guess what? I can change my story. I can look at it and which there's this part of us that you mentioned, the protector, that's like, oh no, let's not look at that. But when we look at it, and it's painful initially to look at, and then we can say, okay, this doesn't serve me now. That was a really tough thing that I went through, but I'm going to sit down now and I'm going to say, how can I make that story into something that serves me right here and now? And so that I'm not, I think about it, it's like we're carrying all this baggage of all these different strategies we had for all these tough things, and we put them on our back and we carry them. And really what any therapist, what any coach is trying to do is to help to let go of that stuff and frame it up in a way that serves us. And we all, I think one of the things that's really hit me hard is I believe we all have access to this kind of infinite intelligence within us, and we need help getting to it. Therapy, coaching, my model, whatever it may be. But we all have kind of at the core of who we are, that intelligence. And when we take the time and start to talk down that part of us that's holding all that baggage so that we can kind of get to where that intelligence lies, it's a really good thing.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that, the stories we tell, I think that is how we can really begin to understand, because just those little stories of those incidents, I remember when, I recall when, because those little stories, they're little snippets of our former life. When I was bullied at school, when my mum didn't talk to me, when I failed those exams, when my boyfriend dumped me, I think all those little stories, they add up to the bigger picture. And I think even whether we tell the stories to ourselves by writing, whether we share them with somebody who we trust, whether we work with a therapist or a coach, I think they are so valuable, because those stories we tell are the ones that give us the insights as to how we behaved, why we behaved, how that impacted on us. That's when we've got that ability to change the story.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I should just run through the three questions that I came up with.
Mm.
What's the story I'm telling? Question number two, is it serving me in this moment, in this moment, in this moment? Question three, is there a more authentic story I can tell? And one of the things I love about this is it's designed to be simple. There's no, you've got to hold your hands like this and speak like this, because it doesn't work anyway. So when I've got something that's super simple and that anybody can relate to, the beauty of this model is, and these questions, when I share it with my kids, my kid can say, "Hey, Dad, you in little me mode right now? That story serving you?" And if he's not a jerk about it, I can hear him and go, "Oh my God, I am up there. And you know what? I'm going to stay here for a few minutes, but I'll be back down, not too long." Like that's the simplicity that I wanted for this model. So those three questions, and the beauty is, we're not saying, "Hey Wendy, how you feeling?" And you go off and you're mad and you're angry and you're not going to take it anymore, and that's where we end up. And so with question two, is this story serving me in this moment? It's yes or no. And that's why I say if it's no, and so I create a little line, horizontal line, and if I no, it goes, that thinking, those stories go above the line, and I call that little me land. And if they do serve me, then that's below that line, and I call that authentic me. And so it's beautiful because I don't have to measure my feelings to determine where I am in this model. Oh, this isn't serving me, and then I can dial in emotion. And I'm really mad, like the person who's just had his flight canceled, or I'm down below that line in a place that serves me. I still have a range of emotion. I might be frustrated. I might be happy, but I'm in a place that's so much more centered and grounded. And it's where, when I'm down below that line, it's where meaning and purpose are. Like I ask, what's the meaning of life? Why am I going through all this stuff? That's all above the line question. Good questions, but it's because we're not in a place that's centered and serving us.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's some great things in there, really great. And I think what I notice for myself is that what might start that whole process is an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
I've got myself into, I'm going to say uncomfortable. I'm going to stick with that for the minute.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm feeling I'm not comfortable in what's going on, but it's causing me a great deal of anxiety. And then I'll go to, what have I done wrong? So it's the feeling, oh gosh, this doesn't feel right. But so what have I done wrong? What have I done wrong? Because that's where that hardwired bit is. And that anxiety can stay with me for maybe hours, sometimes days, until I really sit down. And sometimes I've got to hash it out with my therapist. Because I don't feel that therapy is only a crisis or if you've got a mental health issue. It's an
Yeah.
exploration. It's wow, this is great to unpack it and look at a different way. Once I've done that and you go, okay, why did I feel that that was my fault? What was happening? And to get that really looking at it in detail, that is, once I've done that and noticing that that was that protector that I had as that small child, and that it's not serving me well, then I get a different perspective. And with that, Chris, the beauty of it is that once we recognize it, we don't need to go there again.
Oh, and it doesn't have as much power over us. It still may come
No.
back, like you said,
Yeah.
but one of the things that you said is that when you're not stuck in that place, you're more open, you're more curious. And one of the things that's really fascinating to me about going through this model is above the line in stories that don't serve us, we're all fear-based. That's
Mm.
the core underlying emotion. And I
Mm.
feel victimized, hopeless, helpless, all of those things. I don't feel like I have agency. And the thing that fascinated me, I looked up what the opposite of fear was. And one article I ran across said the opposite of fear is curiosity. Oh my God, what a great concept. So when I'm down below the line and authentic, I'm just more curious about myself, about why I'm mad at somebody or frustrated with my kids. When I'm down below that line in authentic me land, I'm curious. I'm open to, hey, what is the story? Let's get out those clear glasses because above the line, you've mentioned the protector a couple of times, which is commonly called the ego, or Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body, which makes my skin crawl. It's like, oh my God, I don't want that. If you take all of that stuff and say, get rid of this thinking that the ego is the enemy, and you say, oh, I have some hard wiring that is the reason we're on this planet today. The fight, flight, freeze response, the amygdala in our brain, the part that's wired to keep us safe. If you instead call that the protector, capital P, this is
Mm.
an important part of us, and we give that part of us a voice. Off the air, we did, we talked about it. It's happening all over the globe right now. Canceled flights everywhere, and people get off the flight they thought they were flying to, and they march to the counter agent, and they let that counter agent just have it. Worst airline, I'm never flying again. Blah blah blah. I can't believe this is ruining me. And when you think about it, here's this protector, big old balloon, and that counter agent is behind the counter, mouth closed, not saying a word, as this person vents and vents and vents, and the balloon gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And at some point, the the person who's complaining gets a sheepish grin, like, "Oh my God, I just said that," and then the counter agent says, "You know what, Mr. Smith? I'm really sorry about what's happened. Let's see what we can do to solve it." And that's the other thing that's so fascinating. Above the line, I'm in problem orientation. Below the line, I'm in solution orientation. So if we can recognize that there's those times that it's that protector telling the story of it could only be happening to me. Nobody else could possibly understand what I'm going through, kind of things. And I let that part of me have it say, dropping F bombs, telling you the things that the protector will say to you that you would never let anybody say to you. When you start to just give that part of yourself a voice and say, okay, now how can I take what the important pearls of that are and authenticize that story so that it serves me? When we start looking at that part of our wiring that way and give it that platform, all of a sudden it becomes our partner instead of our pain. Oh my God, the pain it can cause, right, Wendy? Oh.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. You're right. The fear, the feeling of aloneness that no one else understands, and it, yeah, definitely fear based. And I think it is the curiosity. I often think, let's be our own detective, figure out what's really going on. And that's why when I work with clients, I quite often go, okay, you created those behaviors. Where did they come from? Why is it still causing you grief? Let's look at it, because it really did serve you well at one point, but
Yeah.
it's not doing you any good right now. I think this is so powerful, Chris, and I think I love it. I love what you're saying, because you're speaking my language, definitely.
Well, and you know
Definitely.
what? We're speaking everybody's language. That's the beauty of this. Like, this is universal. And when I start looking at this, this model and these questions for myself, then the other thing is it's prescriptive, Wendy. It's like, oh, I know what I need to do. I need to be I want to be below the line more often. Never ever saying I'm not going above the line ever again, because that's garbage. We're always going to go up there. But now the protector's not going to have that as loud of a voice. I'm going to listen to him, so he's going to feel heard and not
Mhm.
and kind of deal with his resistance. And then I'm below that line, and then I start to see people from that perspective. I'm like, oh, here's good leadership. I'm going to create a space, not a safe space, because I think that's low. We just can't say anything bad. I'm going to create a space where I know people can trust me to be honest, to talk about the good, talk about the bad, and not do it in a way that's confrontational or you're going to put me on the defensive. And we can do that. We don't not very good at it because we don't practice that very
Mhm.
often. But all of a sudden I help to bring other people below that line. And and they don't even have to know about it.
No.
That's the beauty of it. It's because it turns out it's my behavior that's driving so much of my environment, the world around me.
Yeah. Yeah. I have fascinating conversation, and I love your model.
Thank
I'm
you.
just going to ask you one thing that people can take away that they could put into practice right now.
Well, you just gave it away. My number one tip to people is, even if you just can't get your arms around this model and the questions for whatever reason, and I'm sure there are people that'll just be like, oh, no, that's whatever. The one tip that I think is the most important is, do yourself a favor and make the rest of your life from here on out practice.
Mm.
And that is like, what do you mean? Well, I'm just going to be practicing to be a better version, the version of myself that I'd like to be. And when I look at that, then what I'm doing is, what's really lovely about it is, because I'm framing my life as practice, the protector gets to take a step down, like, oh, it's practice. Okay, well then I guess I don't need to be as worried. So much of what we're doing is, when you start to recognize this model, a lot of what we do is how we language things so that the protector doesn't feel like they need to be on guard, right?
Mm.
So make your life practice. You'll be glad you did.
That's great. I'm going to put all your details in the show notes,
Okay.
but what is one easy way that people get in touch with you?
Probably the best way is, go to ohthestorieswetell.com, ohthestorieswetell.com. And my phone number's there. You can text me, you can call me, you can fill out a contact form, whatever you want. And there's some good articles there, and the full model is on the homepage
Mm.
that you can look at. And a fabulous quote that I thought was from Eckhart Tolle until, not Eckhart Tolle, from Viktor Frankl, about the space between the stimulus and the response. Do you know that quote?
Mm.
There's in the space between stimulus and response, there's a space. There's a space between them, and we are able to choose our response. And in our response is our growth and our freedom. What? So if I have lots of space between stimulus and response, I'm more likely to have a lot more growth and a lot more freedom. So anyway, Eckhart Tolle is widely attributed to that quote, and he's the author of Man's Search for Meaning, also a lovely and wonderful book.
Thank you, Chris, for today. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. I appreciate it.
I hope you found this episode interesting as well as helpful. And you can find out more about my guest by going into the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about me, then go to my website, wendycatewell.co.uk. And there you can also book a call and find out how you can work with me. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Until next time, bye.